Well, good evening. It is really and truly an honor from my family to be able to be here with you and with your family. And I have to just ask a quick question. How many of you, when you came, you saw the program and you saw a senator was coming to speak and you kind of groaned inside? Okay, you don't have to admit it publicly. The nice part is if you raise your hand, the lights are so bright I couldn't have seen you anyway. In many ways, we get politicked out. Tonight's not going to be about politics. It's going to be about us. I do want to tell you Dallas Baptist University is extremely important to my family. And it may seem a little odd because I didn't graduate from there and our daughters didn't attend there. But I have lifelong friends. A couple of them are here tonight, Darren Wood and Lance Shoemake. But straight out of college, they're both graduates of Dallas Baptist University. And when we connected and met around seminary time, our hearts connected in a way that's maintained that friendship now for several decades. I used to serve with the Baptist General Convention of Texas. And when I served with the BGCT, I had the opportunity to be able to help coordinate youth-led revival teams. And you know how when you go fishing, there's like a certain honey hole that you go to and go back to that same spot because you know the fish are there? When we were looking for folks to be able to serve on youth-led revival teams, DBU was the honey hole. Because if we recruited students from DBU to be able to serve, they were going to be solid, they were going to be biblically solid, and they were going to lead and finish well. Never once did we ever recruit a student in all those summers that didn't serve well that was a DBU graduate. Had the opportunity to be able to speak at a DBU chapel probably 15 years ago. And I remember that just as a time. That was a special moment to be able to be there. Interestingly enough, now that I'm serving in the Senate, the DBU leadership group, when they're coming for their graduate level work, and they come to Washington, D.C., I take time away from my schedule to be able to help tour them around and to be able to spend time just with them to be able to talk about leadership. And if you come to my office, in the United States Capitol, you'll see a desk there that's 100 and some odd years old, and right on the edge of it is a small version of the statue of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. That's the replica of the one that sits on that extremely windy hill in Dallas, where Dallas Baptist University is. There's no markings on it, but I know where it's from. And it's a reminder for me of my job as a senator to be able to serve, but it's also your campus that set that example, that sits on the edge of my desk. So DBU is a special place to our family. And for those of you that have invested and that have engaged at DBU, thank you for doing that. Because it matters to the entire country, and it certainly matters to Dallas, and it certainly matters to Texas. Keep doing the good work, because you're raising up leaders. I happen to have on my staff, working in the United States Senate, a recent graduate from Dallas Baptist University, that we recruited him because of his research, his writing skills, and his tenacity for what is good. And he's turned out to be a great team member. But don't tell him that. Dr. Wright, thanks for your leadership. Leading universities is a tough task at this stage of our nation. And so thanks for good, solid, stable leadership. It's much needed. In campuses that are around the country, where students go to scream at other students to silence them, where debate can't really occur, and where a diverse educational background is pushed down, and where people of faith are intentionally silenced because they're those people, you're leading a campus where people are talking through the hard issues in a way that's good, in the way that honors people. So keep doing that, because we need that in the days ahead. We need, as a nation, to raise up future leaders that will really make a difference. So for those of you that are investing and engaging in that, please do that. For the DBU students that are here, let me read a passage of scripture from you that you probably already memorized. Ecclesiastes 12:12. Of the making of books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. I know you already have that in your heart right now already, but it's worth it. On the other side, God's raising you up to be leaders of the nation, and we need more leaders in the nation, so don't quit. Let me give you just a little bit of background that I want to be able to spend just a little bit of time talking about free enterprise and where we're headed from here, because this dinner is a celebration of what is happening in free enterprise in the nation and what God is doing through Dallas Baptist University, raising a business and leaders all across the country. But let me give you just a little bit of background for me personally. I was born at Baylor Hospital, just right down the street. The remarkable lady who brought me into that hospital and who also looked at me and decided to take me home anyway is sitting right over there. That's my mom, Linda Garrett, right over there. She's a pretty remarkable lady. Her sister Carolyn, who is like a second mom to me. If you've got family where you've got aunts and uncles and other folks that are kind of around you that never let you get any slack, but were the safe person to go to when your mom was tough on you, and you could go visit with them and you found out they were even tougher, that's my Aunt Carolyn. And she has the opportunity to be able to be here tonight as well. And so I'm really grateful that both of you are here. 20 plus years of youth ministry before I ever went to Congress, serving both in the local church, the Baptist General Convention of Oklahoma, and the Baptist General Convention of Texas. I served as the director of the largest camp in the United States, a camp called Falls Creek, for 15 years. It was an amazing ministry to be able to be there and see so many students. Now, I tell you that background because you're probably looking to say, where's the politics of that? And in all likelihood, when I tell you I was 20 years in youth ministry, depending on your relationship with your personal youth pastor, your church, that either encourages you or terrifies you to know that I'm in the United States Senate. Because at some point you probably close your eyes and think, what would the world be like if my youth pastor was leading the nation in the Senate? Just let that soak in for a moment. What would that be like? Worse than that, I'm on the Intelligence Committee. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, so I'm helping manage your money. You're welcome. In 2008 and 2009, what my wife calls life's greatest interruption occurred for us. Out of decades of ministry, God called us to be able to set that aside and whispered over and over again to us, come follow me. Now, many of you have been through this same experience, where you thought you were going this direction with God, and he said, yes, you're going that direction, but this is where I'm taking you. You've experienced that still small voice where God interrupted your life and said, I have a bigger purpose and a different plan for you, a different task, a task you didn't expect in the past, but that I've been preparing you for. For the students that are here, the very simple phrase to you, you have no idea where God is taking you, but get ready. Prepare yourself for whatever task is out there. Because the decisions that you make now will prepare you, or you will fail to be prepared when the time and the call comes. For those of you in business know this full well. You weren't called to just lead a business. You were called to a task for a purpose. And God has gifted you and placed you and allowed you to be able to be in a spot because he has a bigger purpose. And he wants to be able to use you through that. So for this life's interruption for us, it's a season that we're in, but it's a season for a purpose, just like you. Like you, I had people that said to me as I left ministry, quote unquote, where they challenged me and said, how can you be in ministry and go into politics? How can you possibly go into a spot that dark? And I would typically say to people, yeah, you're right, that's very uncharacteristic of God to send light to dark places. Very uncharacteristic. But it's the same thing that you've experienced as well. So I've gone back to Scripture to be able to search it, and it was a very interesting thing for me to be able to go back through Scripture and to be able to look at it in a little different lens. You realize from the Old Testament, the 39 books of the Old Testament, 36 of the 39 books of the Old Testament were either written to, by, or about a political leader. Now let that soak in for a second. Either to, by, or about a political leader. 36 of the 39 books of the Old Testament. The best part about this speech is, if you get bored through the rest, you can start trying to figure out the other three. Okay? 36 of the 39. A third of the New Testament, that is the book of Acts and the book of Luke, a third of the New Testament was written to a political leader to tell them about how amazing Jesus is, who he is and what he's done. In fact, if you want to go even deeper into Saul, when Saul is struck blind on the way to Damascus, he crawls his way into Damascus, and when he gets there, God speaks to the prophet and says, I want you to go lay your hands on this person and heal him. To which the prophet responds back to God, do you know who this guy is? And God says, yes, I do. He's my chosen instrument to the Jews, the Gentiles, and the Gentile kings. In the rest of the book of Acts and the rest of Paul's ministry, you find him in front of the Jews, the Gentiles, and then in front of political leaders. I could go on and on and on. Because God does have a passion for people. And people are affected by their families, by the economics, by the business community that's around them and opportunities that they have, and by government. God does care about those things. And I think what he cares about, we should care about. But we happen to live in an age where when anyone steps into the national dialogue, it's immediately disruption and it's immediately dispute and very loud discussion in very bizarre ways. Agreed? This national dialogue that we have where we tend to fight about everything. We fight about faith, we fight about food, we fight about football. We should fight about football, it's a whole different issue. We tend to argue about everything all the time. And I have people come up to me all the time and say, it's never been more contentious than it is now. Never. And I always smile at them and say, do you remember 1861 when we were shooting at each other? Remember back in 1856 where there's a House member from South Carolina that got mad at a speech from a senator on the floor of the Senate? And so he went into the Senate chamber with his cane with a gold head on it and beat him almost to death on the Senate floor because of a speech that he gave. Yes, it's been more contentious than it is now. But we're keenly aware of it because the contentiousness is not over there, it's here. It's in the conversations that we have. It's on college campuses around the country where people are not allowed to be able to have open debate. It's even contentious around simple things that we've taken for granted, like the free market. You know, most of us just believe, everyone believes in a free market. A free market allows people to be able to become whatever they choose to become. And so we believe in this opportunity for every person. If we're in El Salvador right now, yes, they have an open free market in theory, but in El Salvador right now, you struggle because every business that you run, some thug comes along and extorts you, and you're not able to keep half of it. And the corruption in the streets is depressing their free market, so it's really not free because of corruption. And in other places, that struggle we see multiplied everywhere. In China, they'll allow you to be able to do what they choose for you to be able to do. In Russia, if you're an oligarch, you can choose what you want, but everyone else has to be able to live in poverty. And we live in this free society with an open free market, and we assume, doesn't everyone see the benefit of this? Doesn't everyone see the opportunity for every person to be able to rise? And I would tell you, not so anymore. Something as simple as saying we're having a banquet to be able to talk about the free market is radical and revolutionary to some in our nation. Because there's this undercurrent that's flowing right now, where I hear people in Washington, D.C. from all over the country say, you know what, China has moved 90% of their people out of poverty in the last 40 years. Maybe that system of government is more efficient and better. That's not an esoteric conversation. That's a real conversation that I hear in Washington, D.C. There are folks that were elected just a few weeks ago. They were elected on an outright socialist platform. There was a bill dropped in the United States Senate just a few months ago by a senator that will be one of 10 running for president soon, so I'll let you fill in the blanks, by a senator that dropped a bill that this was the bill. The bill was any business that reaches $1 billion in total assets goes under government control. It wasn't a theory. It was a piece of legislation dropped where they're trying to get signatures on it to say we'll have no large businesses in America that aren't run by the government. You see, this concept we have of free markets and about allowing people to rise really is under dispute. And as people stand up and say our government is messed up, our nation is messed up, there's a generation that are rising up that are saying this isn't working, and then they're asking the next question, so what does? What can we change to? It's kind of like having an old car And at some point you finally decide, I've run this old car long enough, let me switch to a different one. There is a generation growing up that they're thinking, this car worked for a while, for 200 and some odd years, let's switch to something different. And as a community, we still have a responsibility to be able to help articulate what happens in a free market where we protect the rule of law, unlike what's happening in El Salvador right now. We regard the rule of law that every person is allowed to be able to rise and to be able to choose any job in any place. And we fight tenaciously to knock down all barriers in all places so that every person gets an opportunity. What is it about a culture that says, how can we protect the rights of individuals to be able to keep what they earn and to be able to bless others? There is no nation like ours. We are still a city on a hill. And we're at our best when we shine well. But for those of us in the Christian community, we understand the free market is not the end. You see, Christianity thrives in China, in Russia, in El Salvador, in the United States, wherever the word of Jesus goes out. In whatever economic system and in whatever culture, the truth of Jesus is true in that culture and thrives in that place. We as Christians can't get caught up and say this economic system is the system of Jesus. He supersedes all of that and speaks to every culture and every place. But the free market that we enjoy is not the end, it's a means. And it allows us to be able to gain wealth and influence and opportunity to be able to present the gospel into the places that we go, into what we do. If the acquisition of wealth to you is the end, you will be like the writer of Ecclesiastes and find out one day it's all chasing after wind. But if the acquisition of wealth and of position and of opportunity to lead leads you to the opportunity to be able to influence people for good, you're figuring it out. Dallas Baptist University is lived by that means. Most of you in this room live by that principle, or you wouldn't be here right now. And if there's anything I can do for us tonight, it's encourage you to keep going. Don't grow weary of doing what is good and what makes a real difference. Peter wrote in 1 Peter chapter 2, a verse that most everybody in this room knows, where he said, as aliens and strangers in this world, live such good lives among the pagans, those who don't know God. Live such good lives that though they that they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day that he visits us. Peter set out for this church and said, you live in a culture where people don't understand God. Do we live in a culture like that today? Yes, we do. You live in a culture where people don't understand God. But Peter's writing to them saying, don't go hide. Live in such a way that people will notice your life is different. And when they see that, they'll have the opportunity to be able to know God. The free market for us is an opportunity to be able to live out our values in a protected society so we can demonstrate that. But it's not just thriving in us. What's really interesting to me is Peter gave 4 quick examples. He said, if you want to really make a difference, if you want to really stand out in your culture, here's what you should do. Read the next verse that he said. He said, as aliens and strangers in this world, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day that he visits us. The very next phrase is what? Most of the time we don't know. Here's the very next phrase after that. Honor authority. Honor authority. It's the first of 4 examples that Peter gives. You want to do things different? You want to stand out in culture? Honor authority. And Peter gives specifically the example of government authority. But really it's honoring authority, period. And he starts giving practical ideas, honoring authority, living different with your family, doing work different, honoring God in your work. And he says even honoring God in suffering. He gives very practical ideas about how to be able to step out in that. So let me give you a couple practical ideas as well. Can I do that? Because sometimes we get caught up into thinking if we're going to change the nation, we're going to elect someone and they're going to go to D.C. and change the nation. Well, I have bad news for you. Washington doesn't change the country changes Washington. That's how it works in a republic. We're a republic that we don't expect someone to get elected and then go turn the country around. The people in Washington, D.C. reflect who we are more than we want to admit. You want to know who we are as a nation? D.C. is a mirror to the country. This is who we are. And you don't change that by electing different people. You change that by being different people. And as our states and as our communities are, that is reflected in who we elect. Now, you may be excited about that or you may be depressed about that. I don't want to get into a political conversation. But D.C. reflects us more than we want to admit. So the specific issue is, do we change the nation just by changing the leaders? Or do we change the nation by changing ourselves? We want to make the biggest impact on the nation? Let me give you some practical, quick ideas. Number one is this: honor God in your family. We're a nation made up of families. And as you honor God with your family, it makes a deep impact. Many of you have made sure that your kids, as they grow up knowing God, having the opportunity to be able to receive Christ, having the opportunity to be able to grow deeper in their faith because you have taken the responsibility, not sending them off to church and saying they're going to go do this for me, but you have invested in your kids and in your grandkids. You're the ones teaching them how to read scripture on their own. You're the one teaching them how to tithe. You're the one teaching them how to pray. You're the ones investing in them. You're the one living out the principle of passing on your faith to the next generation. Keep doing it. Our families make an incredible difference. We're a nation made up of families. And as we honor God with our families, we change the nation. And as our families disintegrate, our nation disintegrates. I have conservative friends all the time that'll say, government seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And they want to jump on the stack of government and push it down and get it smaller. Government rises as families collapse. Every time. As families collapse, education struggles because teachers are trying to be parents and teachers at the same time, and it's tough to do two tasks at once. They can't be parents and teachers at the same time, and so education struggles. Criminal justice becomes a bigger and bigger issue for us as families collapse. Even employment becomes more and more difficult. That's why many of you are saying the same thing. Why can't I find enough people to hire that just show up on time and that are drug-free? Because of collapsing families. But the whole time we want to jump on the stack of government and push government down. You know what the most effective method is? Get underneath families and lift them up. You want to make a practical difference in your community and your nation? Not only honor God in your own family, go mentor another family. Go engage. You know that kid down the street that drives you crazy? Invite their family over and get to know them. That kid may need a mentor. That classroom may need somebody that'd be able to come and read to them. Engage with a college student that's from out of town. Many of you that are around DBU and love DBU, why don't you, if you don't have a college student that's going to DBU right now, why don't you adopt one of the college students that are there? You can do that through your church, you can do that through the university, and just be able to take them in. I had a family that when I was in college that basically adopted me. On Sunday afternoons, I was over at their house. Washing clothes, yes, that's true. Hanging out with their family. I'm telling you, they were as close to the bunkers as you could ever get. And your laughter will tell me your age if you get that statement. For everyone else, turn to someone else and ask them who Archie Bunker is. But they were dear to me because they took me in. They were part of my church. And they were helping me through my own life. Mentor a family. I talk to a lot of people that give financially and they feel like there's something else they should do. There is. Pass on who you are. Mentor a kid. Help a newlywed family. The vast majority of the families in the United States now never marry. The majority now. And there's a generation growing up that consider marriage only a precursor to divorce, and divorce is expensive, and so they just never go through it the first time. Go mentor a young family. Change the country. Second thing is simple, and I've only got 19 of these, so it won't take long. Second thing is simple, but it's incredibly complicated for us. We as Christians should lead the nation in the issue of race. Dr. Wright mentioned it before. Several years ago, I started having a simple conversation with people in my state. And this simple conversation went like this: has your family ever invited a family of another race to your home for dinner? Just a question. Has your family ever invited a family of another race to your home for dinner? The vast majority of people that I asked that question to, regardless of their race, regardless of their socioeconomics, the vast majority of people that I asked that question to gave me one of two answers. Either no, or my favorite one that I heard most of the time, I have friends of another race. I would smile and say, that's not what I asked. I didn't ask if you had friends of another race. I asked, has your family ever had a family of another race in your home for dinner? Now, I called it Solution Sundays, just saying if we're going to solve the race issue and about racial reconciliation in relationships, it's not going to be a piece of legislation, because race at its core is a heart issue. And if there's any issue that the church should lead on, it should be the issue of race, because we believe that God created each of us in his image. Regardless of the skin color on the outside, or the culture, or the background, or the first language that you speak, we believe that you are a person created in God's image and has value and worth. And we speak to people differently about that. But the issues of race have gone back for millennia. You realize that in the book of Jonah, we get caught up in the first chapter in the whole big fish and him getting swallowed, which would be horrible. If you can imagine being in stomach acid for 3 days, what a pleasant experience that would be. But Jonah at its core is a story about racial hatred. Because Jonah by chapter 4 ends up preaching the gospel, and then when the people repent, Jonah's mad about it because he hated that race. Millennia, this is an issue for our society. Most of the world doesn't even attempt to put races together. Most countries in the world, you are isolated. Your tribe, your background, your language, you don't associate with other people. But in the United States, we've tried to do things very different, and we've had a horrible background for 2 centuries in race. But this is an area that if the church would step up and lead, we can begin to see each other how God sees us. So let me ask you a simple question. Do you expect race to be solved by some group of politicians sitting around a table having a conversation with the media around you? Or do you expect the issue of race to be resolved around your table, at your house? You want to do something practical? Mentor a child. Take in a college student. Help out a young couple that's not even considering marriage but should. You want to make a difference in our nation? Well, isn't your family? Invite a family of another race to your home for dinner and just sit down and have dialogue. Why don't you be part of the solution rather than saying someone needs to solve it, actually doing something? Because I firmly believe that whether it's poverty or whether it's family or whether it's race, all of these boil down to each of us deciding if we're going to be a part of the solution or if we're going to think we're going to vote for somebody and they're going to go solve this. We're Americans. We solve the issues. You want a biblical example? A guy named Nehemiah was a slave cupbearer who had probably never seen Jerusalem. In fact, Jerusalem had fallen 150 years before the story begins. His brother, probably also a slave, comes back in from a trip to Jerusalem, and Nehemiah looks at his brother Hanani and says, "What's Jerusalem like? What are the people like?" And Hanani responds, his brother responds to him, "Oh, the city's in disgrace. The people are disgraced. The walls are torn down. The gates are burned with fire. It's a mess." And Hanani walks away. But Nehemiah drops to his knees. 2 different people. Hananiah saw the problem and walked away. Nehemiah just heard about the problem and said, God, help me be part of the solution. Are you more like Hananiah, or are you more like Nehemiah? You watch the news and see the problems and think somebody else needs to fix that? Or are you Nehemiah, brokenhearted, saying, God, what's my part? In my family, we have a running joke about whether you're Hananiah or Nehemiah, and it's all about the sink in the kitchen. You know where I'm going? I'm a dad, so I've actually done this. It is exactly 30 inches from the sink to the dishwasher, exactly 30 inches. But dishes end up in the sink, not 30 inches to the left in the dishwasher. Come on, anybody else witness this? So I say, are you Hananiah? And it's like somebody else's problem right there in the sink. Or are you Nehemiah putting it in the dishwasher? Simple test. But it sure works in culture. Because way too many times we say our schools are a mess, criminal justice is an issue, somebody needs to help out on families. Wow, where can we ever solve the issue of race? What's going to happen on poverty? How come we're fighting drug problems? Those are big issues. You know, what's on TV tonight? Hananiah. You realize Nehemiah, when he picked up and went to Jerusalem, organized the people there to be able to just work on their section of the wall. Now, most of you know this story because your pastor preaches it every time there's a building campaign. But the fascinating part of this story is Nehemiah said, I don't want you to build the whole wall. I want you to build the wall next to your house. For 150 years, the people of Jerusalem had lived next to the broken down wall. For 150 years. But they repaired it in 56 days because everybody took the section next to their house. Not a bad example. The issues that we face as a nation, we've lived in the middle of. And at some point, we've got to turn and say, I'm going to start working on the issues next to my house. And I'm going to expect other Christians to work on the issues next to theirs. And let's watch and see what God does. To move, to pray more than we complain, and to fulfill what God called us to do. This is a gathering of people of action. You experience it in free enterprise and in your business, in your leadership. This is a room full of leaders. But it's not just about your dollars. It's about your wisdom. It's about your experience. It's about who God has made you, and you passing that on to a generation that is drifting into socialism and drifting into debate that has led to arguments, that has led to contentious shouting at the whole time they're asking, where is truth? Pass on what you know. Because God has gifted you and called you and directed you for a reason. And God help you to be able to fulfill that. Dr. Wright, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this time, because your university is very special and very dear to my family. And it is absolutely my honor to be able to stand with you in ministry and what you're doing here. God bless you.